Many times in Emergent, when you create a project, you want to create a control panel that will allow you to access various parameters of the network as well as controls for training and testing in one location rather than have to jump around. The way you do that in Emergent is the following. Basically what you do is you want to create what Emergent calls a select edit. The way you do that is you go over here in the left panel and control or right click on edits, go down to new, and you want to do one object, and then type. You don't want to do cluster run, you want to do select edit. And then we're going to give it a name instead of the default. We're just going to call it control panel, and then say OK. And then you'll notice over in the left panel you now have something called control panel, and it has what are called MBRSs and MTHSs. This stands for members and methods. Okay, now in your control panel, one of the things you might want to put are the controls for training the network. So what you would do is go over where it says Libre Train, click on that, and it then gives you a dialog box with various things. And basically what you might want to do is, here you've got the controls down here, and you would say, okay, select control functions for edit. You then, where it says editor, you don't do a new one, but you take the control panel one and say OK. And you'll now notice in the left panel under MTHS you now have init, run, step, and stop, which are the controls for the train panel. You also might want to add things from the train panel to your control panel, such as the particular input data you're using to train the network and the number of epochs you're using. The way you would do this is you control or right click on a field, in this case input data, go down to add to select edit, say add to control panel, and it gives it a name which you can change. You click on OK. You may also want to change the number of epochs, the maximum number of epochs. You go to add to select edit, control panel, and say OK. And then finally you do train mode. You can control or right click on this, say add to select edit, hit the control panel, and then it will put it in the control panel. You'll now notice if you look in the left hand panel, under control panel and under members, it now has 3 lines for input data, max epoch, and train mode. Now if I click on control panel, you'll now see I have the beginnings of the control panel that has these 3 things in it. And I also, down at the bottom, I have the controls for running the program. Now, I might also want to do things like change the learning rate, inhibition, things like that. And what I do for that is I scroll down in this window and down where it says specs, and I click on a spec I want to copy information from. So say I click on hidden layer, it gives me a dialog box, and here I can basically copy the inhibition information. So let's right or control click on the inhibition field and say add to select edit and control panel, and then hidden layer inhibition. Okay, and now I want to put some of the parameters for the type of inhibition I've chosen into the control panel, and what I do is control or right click on the KWTA field, say add to select edit, control panel, and so forth. And now let's say I also want to take something from the unit spec. So say I want to copy the activation function. I control or right click on the activation function, add to select edit, and then control panel. And then say I want to do things like be able to adjust the conductance. I go down to G bar, control or right click, choose add to select edit, put it in control panel, and hit OK. And then finally, let's say I want to change or have the learning rate in my control panel. I'll click on the connection spec, and then I'll find the learning rate. I will control click or right click on that, add to select edit, control panel, say OK, and now you'll notice over here in the left panel I now have a control panel, and it has a number of members that I've now copied. And if I click on Control Panel here, I will now see all these different members. Now, when I create a control panel like this, I may decide that what I'd really like to do is organize the different parameters into different groups. And one way I can do that is if I control or right-click on this members, go down and select New Group. Basically, I can choose how many new groups I want to create. Let's do 4, and it says it'll create these edit member groups. I hit OK. Now what it does is you'll notice it's given me these different member groups. Now what can I do with them? Well, the first thing I might want to do is actually change the name. So I click on this member group, click on Properties, and say, okay, this is going to be the training parameter group. I hit Apply, and you notice it changes the name. Maybe I want to, so now I did a training parameter group. I'm going to do, say, a unit group, a unit spec group. Well, let's call it a activation group, or activation parameters. Okay, now we're going to have learning parameters. We're going to click on Properties and change that. And hit Apply. And then we also want basically, say we're going to do inhibition parameters. And hit Apply. Now what I can do if I want to organize things is I can basically shift-click on the training things, and then I can drag them down where it says training parameters, and it'll say move into, and then what it does is you'll notice training parameters, I've now moved those 3 fields under training parameters. And now say I want to do inhibition, again I can sort of shift-click on those, drag them into the inhibition parameters group. It'll ask me whether I want to move into that. I say yes. I will now do the unit spec parameters, which are the activation function. I shift-click on those, drag those into the activation parameters group, and then finally the Libre connection spec, I just drag that into the learning parameters subgroup. And if I now click on the control panel up here, you'll notice that I've now taken all these parameters and now they're now organized into these groups, and it's much easier to see what's going on. Another thing I could do if I wanted to change the order in which these showed up, I could sort of say, okay, let's take training parameters and drag that down here, and instead of having a square I just see a line, and I just say move here. So now I've moved things around, so training parameters is now no longer at the top. If I look at the control panel or the select edit, all the training parameters have moved down. And what I did was I clicked on the folder and dragged the folder down, and when I drag the folder down, it moves everything else that's under the folder. So, and then the final thing is I created this one too many of the member groups, and basically what I can do is I can just control or right click on this and then basically say delete, and then I now have a control panel that looks like this. So that's how you create a control panel in Emergent.